Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. Mistakes happen. We all make mistakes. Even those whom we somehow believe are immune to making mistakes still make them. There's no getting around this fact of life. We all make mistakes, and that's just the way it has to be. The only question is whether or not we will own up to the mistakes that we make. Sometimes mistakes are quite innocent in nature. We really thought we were doing the right thing and may have had good reason for thinking this, but it turned out to be wrong. This variety, even though they aren't really all that terrible, since they could be called honest mistakes, are relatively easy to own up to. It's probably because there wasn't all that bad of a mess up in these cases that we're willing to admit that we were wrong. A quick, I didn't know, or I'll try to think it through better next time, or something along these lines, and the slate is clean. But unfortunately, there are mistakes that aren't so innocent. These are the genuine screw-ups, which cannot be excused as honest, whatever that may mean. The person or people involved should have known better and maybe did, but they did whatever they did anyway. One might think that in such a case, it would be obvious that there is some owning up to do and an apology or some sort of confession is forthcoming. But for easily understood psychological reasons, it is frequently not so simple a matter as just admitting an error. People tend to defend themselves more in these situations since they are more reluctant to acknowledging that they did something truly wrong. There is more at stake here since it wasn't just a basic error in judgment. This was a real screw-up, and it has to be recognized as such. This takes a certain amount of courage and confidence, qualities that aren't always available when we need them. Then, of course, there are those mistakes that aren't mistakes at all. These are those nasty situations where we thought we could get away with whatever it was we thought we could get away with. We might try to write these off as mere mistakes, but we ourselves know, and perhaps others do as well, that they were nothing of the sort. We may do whatever we can to convince ourselves that they weren't really all that bad, but there may come a point where we have to look ourselves in the eye and come to terms with what we have done. This is not an easy process, as most of us have found out at some time in our lives. Whatever the background and the underlying motivations, we are all going to blow it at periodic intervals. With some of us, it seems like it's a daily or even hourly experience. Perhaps these people are just more aware of their own shortcomings than others. Of those whose mistakes seem to come less frequently, some are genuinely good or careful individuals whose concern for making sure things don't go awry should be commended. Others may not fit into that category, but just tend to overlook a lot of what goes on in their lives, as they might ignore dust under the fridge. It's all a matter of how much one chooses to dwell on these things and really look in the proverbial mirror. It's probably always been this way. This is part of being human, and there is no reason to think that people in the recent or distant past were any better about any of this than we are. There is certainly no shortage of them in a classic book like the Bible. The Bible makes no attempt to smooth over the many problematic situations its main protagonists went through. Some of these involved unmistakable mistakes on the part of a person who is otherwise considered a good guy. It is with one of these that we wish to focus today. This week's Parsha is called Toldot, meaning either history or generations. It refers to the story of Isaac, the son and heir of Abraham, of whom last week's Parsha dealt with in the long episode of finding him a wife. That wife was Rebecca or Rivka, and with this week we enter into their main story together in the Bible. Of the three patriarchs of Genesis, he is the only one with the Parsha titled to describe his story. The first words of the Parsha state clearly, these are the generations or history of Isaac. Abraham sired Isaac. But it was the unfortunate fate of Isaac to be overshadowed by almost everyone else in the Bible with whom his life is intertwined. His only appearances before this week involved the prediction of his birth and his actual birth and circumcision, things which he really played a somewhat inactive role. Even in the story of the binding of Isaac, in which Abraham came within a hair's breadth of offering him as a sacrifice on an altar, he plays only a background role, as important as it was. He seems to play his part with complete passivity and has almost no input in the drama. During the long story of Abraham's servant Eliezer, finding Rivka by a well and negotiating with her family over marriage to Isaac, he has no part whatsoever. It isn't even clear that he knew what was going on at all. It was Abraham who sent Eliezer to his old homeland to find a wife for Isaac. And it was Eliezer who was the central figure in the whole thing. To some degree, he is overshadowed by Rivka herself, as her personality is explored and everything revolves around her actions. Even in this week's Parsha, which is supposed to deal primarily with Isaac, it turns out that it is almost entirely concerned with his twin sons, Jacob and Esau. Their conflicts and contrasts from the womb until well into adulthood take up almost the entire Parsha. There is a brief interlude concerning Isaac and Rivka living among the Philistines on the southern coast of Canaan, with a lot of stuff about wells and water rights, but it really has little to do with the main story the Bible is presenting. And this main story deals with Jacob and Esau more than Isaac. Even Rivka plays a much more proactive role in the dramas that take place. First, it is with the conception and growth in her womb, during which she experiences extreme pains. She consults a prophet of some sort and is told that the two sons she is bearing will be founders of great nations who will always be at odds with each other. When one will rise, the other will fall. When they are born, Jacob is grasping the heel of his brother as if he wants to emerge first. Jacob's tendency is to be straight and a, quote, dweller in tents, while Esau becomes a hunter and a man of the field. The Torah states explicitly that Isaac loved Esau because he brought him meat, while Rivka loved Jacob and seems disturbed by Esau's behavior. At one point, Esau actually sells his birthright to Jacob for a pot of stew because he was hungry from a hunt. This only sets the scene for what was to come. When Isaac is old and blind, he tells Esau that he wishes to bless him. He instructs him to bring him meat in honor of this occasion. When Rivka hears this, she tells Jacob to quickly disguise himself as Esau and bring in food that she prepared so that he receives this blessing instead. Although the plan seems quite risky, it succeeds. Isaac is completely fooled by the disguise and falls for the story Jacob tells him. He blesses Jacob with the blessing for the firstborn, which, in a sense, Jacob really deserved. Esau enters the room as Jacob is leaving and is told what had happened. Isaac says that Jacob would indeed be the beneficiary of that blessing, regardless of how he obtained it. Esau realizes how Jacob tricked him and cries out in obvious pain and sorrow. He understands that he has been outsmarted by his brother and begs his father for a blessing of his own. But Isaac can only give him a secondary blessing, clearly subordinate to that of Jacob. This cements the hatred that Esau would forever bear towards his brother and seals the fate of both of them. It is interesting that when all the dust settles and Isaac finally understands what has been going on between his sons their entire lives, instead of reversing the blessing and perhaps even cursing Jacob, he seems to acknowledge that he was the rightful recipient after all. Aside from all else that is puzzling in this parsha, why Isaac favored Esau to begin with and why Jacob had to deceive his father to receive this crucial blessing, this conclusion seems totally unjustified. Why didn't Isaac curse Jacob for what he did? Why didn't he simply turn around and bless Esau instead? Why did he passively let things go the way they did instead of proactively correcting the obvious injustice? His only response when it was over was to summon Jacob and tell him to not marry a girl from Canaan and to go back to Mesopotamia to find a wife from their own family, just as Isaac's own wife was found. He then acknowledges the blessing, saying, quote, God will bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers, and you shall be an assembly of nations. God will give you the blessing of Abraham, to you, your descendants, to inherit the land where you have lived, which God gave to Abraham. In other words, Isaac made Jacob his primary and spiritual heir with the fateful right of dominion over the promised land. In the end, Isaac acknowledged that Jacob deserved it and not Esau. But what about the underhanded way in which he received this blessing? What about the injustice of the whole thing? Perhaps the answer to this is that Isaac himself was finally realizing the mistake he had been making for the past several decades. His favoring Esau all those years for no other reason than that he supplied him with food, was a huge blunder. He was blinded, both literally and figuratively, by this form of bribe. He shouldn't have fallen for it, but he did. His wife saw through the ruse, but he couldn't. This was a colossal mistake that was only remedied when the dramatic events of this week's Parsha unfolded. It required Jacob and Rivka with their deceptive plan to cut through the ruse and set things right. But it wasn't until it was finally over that Isaac saw that this was the way things should have been. His blessing to Jacob, after all the drama, was his belated acknowledgement that he had been wrong all through the years. This was probably not an easy thing for him to do. It came after half a lifetime of pursuing the wrong course and favoring the wrong son. How many of us could do this? Wouldn't we more likely have refused to acknowledge the error and attempted to maneuver things to be the way that we had always believed they should be? Perhaps this was the crowning moment of Isaac's life. After being overshadowed by others, including his own sons, this was his late life moment of greatness. It wasn't the greatness of submitting himself to die at his father's hand or anything else that singles him out. It was his willingness to acknowledge that he was wrong. It may not be the type of greatness that we normally seek out, but it is a rare and precious quality nevertheless. It is not just anyone who can truly admit their mistakes. Shabbat Shalom.